Muse, you're a character. So am I. And that's exactly what I want to talk about. Fancy that. Ha ha. Now, you and I have told some really good stories together. You've given me the ideas, and I have realized them into a form that people can consume. Sounds kind of sexy, doesn't it? Or kind of Soylent Green as people. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is this: characters. The reason why I think that a story is compelling is characters. Now, I have read a number of stories, be they books or whatever, scripts or whatever, from all writers of all types, new writers, old writers, middling writers, whatever, wherein the characters that are used as sort of vehicles to tell the story with are two-dimensional. And when that happens, the story falls flat. I don't want to read that story. And I think that very often characters become secondary to story. And that's a tragedy because characters are the things that drive the story forward. And a lot of times what happens, I believe, is that writers will either just throw a generic character into the story without giving much thought to it, or they'll use a stereotype. Now, from my perspective, there are two different types of characters. There's an archetype and a stereotype. An archetype is a thing that serves as a model for which copies are made. Okay? And a stereotype is a derogatory or a very generic character built upon a stereotype that panders to specific tropes. Let me give you an example. In my Suicide Station / Suicide Machine stories, there's a character named David David, and David is a stoner. And David is not a stereotypical stoner, he's an archetypical stoner. And the reason that prevents him from being a stereotypical stoner is that I have taken the archetype of a stoner and added it to the story and then imbued that archetype with non-stereotypical characteristics. Yes, of course, David does have archetypical characteristics, but he has other characteristics that give him dimensions. So instead of having a two-dimensional stereotype, I have a multi-dimensional copy of an archetype. And I think that it is imperative that every writer, be you're writing a book, a screenplay, a stage script, whatever you do, is you avoid using stereotypes and instead take an archetype, and there are a finite number of archetypes. You take that archetype, right, and you copy that archetype, and then you throw different dimensions at that archetype to turn it into a multi-dimensional character, because every human being is different. And if you're writing stereotypes, you are writing negative portrayals of an archetype. And readers are not going to want to read your story. Now, the way I kind of do this with my books is that I do everything organically, okay? So as I'm writing the story, and I'm using the characters that are already a part of the universe, I'm writing the story, and I come into an instance where I need a new character. The character that I'm going to add into this was predetermined by the confines of the story. So as long as I am being genuine and honest to the story that has unfolded, the character that I throw at that is going to be organic, and it's going to be honest. So what I do, let's say, for example, I needed David in Suicide Station. I knew that I wanted that type of character, or not that I knew that I wanted that type of character. That character, the idea of that character came out of the writing of the prose, the story. And so when I realized fairly immediately that he was going to be a stoner, I had to decide what was going to make him different, what was going to make him not a stereotype. Okay? So from that, I decided that David was going to have these pearls of wisdom that would come out of his mouth every so often, that would not only possibly change the arc of the story, but change a character, change another character's mind about something. I wanted the readers to be able to experience this archetype in such a way that it might change their mind about the stereotype. And I think that's important to art. As an artist, I want to change people's minds, right? And it's interesting, I had a conversation with my daughter the other day about this particular character. Now, in the honor of transparency, I have never in my life smoked pot. Never smoked pot. So my daughter asked, how could I write a character that his whole gist is smoking pot? He is a archetypical pot smoker. Well, he's not really an archetypical pot smoker, but that's his thing. That's his jam. Pot is his jam. So when I told her, I said, I'm not writing David in such a way that I am commenting on his experience with this actual ingesting of marijuana, of the chronic, of ganja. I am writing observationally about David's behavior and how he interacts with other people. And she was like, oh, okay, I get that. So if I were to attempt to write about David's experience, actual what goes to his, happens to him when he smokes pot, I've got to research that because I've never experienced it myself. I know, crazy, isn't it? I'm a writer and I've never smoked pot. I don't even drink. I don't drink alcohol. I mean, I think it's funny when people say I don't drink. Well, I do drink. I drink water. But I don't drink alcohol. So anyway, but that's not the point. And I think that what we need to do as artists, writers of any sort, is we need to give that kind of care and attention to all of our characters, be they main characters, secondary characters, or even minor characters. Don't just throw a convenience store checkout person into your story just because you have to have that in the plot, in a scene. Give that character some depth. When I read books and when I read scenes or whatever, and I come across a very generic character, all of a sudden I don't care. I don't care about the story. I lose interest in the story. I want to see these characters. Think about this. Remember, I was an actor for a very long time. I guess I still am because I'm going to be doing a show pretty soon, and I'm a little worried about that, but that's not the point. Consider every time you've watched a movie or you go to a play and you see a show, right? And there not every character on the stage or on the screen is a major character. Actors approach these other characters, these minor characters, secondary characters, whatever, with the idea that they have to make them unique. Because if they're just throwing a generic character into the screen, nobody's going to care about him. Nobody's going to care about the character. Nobody's going to care about the actor. And nobody's going to want to hire that actor again. And then that's kind of at the heart of the matter there, at least with acting. But you have to make them interesting, right? Even if they only have one scene, make them memorable. And I come across this a lot as an audiobook narrator. I'm going along, I'm narrating the book, and I come across a scene where there's a character that's probably only going to be in the book 1 or 2 times. And there have been instances where the writing or the writer has given me absolutely no clue as to what that character is like. And what am I supposed to do? I've got to make something up. So it falls onto me. And the same thing happens to the readers. You can't always... I am of the school of thought that you can't give everything to the readers. You have to allow them to use their own imagination to build something of their own inside their mind and make it even more personal. Because I like to give readers that much credit because they can do that. But you can't give them a completely blank slate. You've got to give them something to build on. So you take an archetype, you add a little flavor to it, and then you put that archetype in the scene. And you avoid a stereotype. Nobody wants to read a book filled with stereotypes. Make them unique, make them dimensional, make them interesting, give them problems, give them a tragic flaw, give them an opinion. Make your characters interesting. And when you do that, your story is going to go from here to here. And that is what we want. Right? And Muse, I mean, you've given me some really interesting characters to work with. And Suicide Machine has... There's another number of interesting little wackadoos in there. And I use wackadoo as an endearing term. So, anyway. Muse, that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Characters. Characters. I'm a character. You're a character. You're a character. You're a character, and by gum, I love you.